everyone. Welcome to this panel. We are so excited to have you here. My name is Kristi Boulton, and some of you might recognize my voice, you might not, but I am part of the Fable and Folly Network and in a number of shows, but my primary one is Civilized, where I play Beatrix and Suit. And today I have with me just an incredible cast of folks who are part of the audio drama industry, and I couldn't be more excited to talk to them about filmmaking and podcasting and the intricacies of what bring these two amazing mediums together, and what really you can do as filmmakers and as podcasters to elevate your audio drama game, and why this is such a booming industry. So we're going to jump right into it. Just so you know, watchers and listeners, this is a pre-recorded panel, so unfortunately we can't interact with you live, but I'm sure that if you leave questions and comments at the end, we will do our best to get back to you. So thank you for tuning in. We're so excited you're here, and let's get right to it. So we are going to jump in with our first panelist, who is a wonderful audio drama veteran, Richard Seneque, and his pronouns are he, him. And Richard is a New York-based writer, director, and producer. He started his career in acting and later shifted his focus to writing. His most recent work is his fantasy podcast, Visionaries, an audio drama. And since releasing Visionaries, he's won the Best Producer Award from the Society of Voice Arts and Sciences for its outstanding production. And if you have not listened to the show yet, you must. Visionaries won the Silver Award from the Here Now Festival, and it was also selected by the Gotham Film and Media Institute for its audio series and originals project market slate. Richard is in the process of also producing a season 2. Welcome, Richard.
Hello.
So nice to have you here. Is there anything else you'd like to say about yourself before we keep going?
I'm just really happy to be here, and I'm really happy to be with my fellow audio creators. And this is going to be a ride, so I'm all for it.
Well, welcome. We're so glad you're here. All right. Our next panelist is Faith McQuinn, she, her, and Faith has been a writer and video editor since 2005, working for TV Guide, CBS, and doing a lot of freelance work for country musicians and indie filmmakers. What a plethora of work. She spent 9 years teaching screenwriting and directing at the college level, and after years of helping other people bring their stories to life, she decided to start Observer Pictures in 2015. Through her production company, Faith has produced 4 short films, 3 fiction podcast series, and 3 standalone fiction podcasts. You are a busy lady. Her newest podcast, Apollyon, is currently in its first season. 7 episodes are currently out, with the 8th coming out on February 9th, and I cannot wait. I started listening. The show is so good. That first episode grabs you, so go listen to it. Faith, welcome. Anything you'd like to say to our listeners and watchers?
I know, but that was an amazing introduction. Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Secret out, everyone. I asked everyone to do their own intros. I wish I had done the research and found all this on my own, but it's all available online, and these are phenomenal folks. You can tell from their bios that they're great writers and creators. But we're going to keep going down the line. We've got Eli Barraza. Oh, I almost didn't roll my R. Barraza. And pronouns she, her. Welcome, Eli. So glad to have you here. Now, Eli is a Los Angeles-based creator who entered fiction podcasting via the writer's room for the time travel conspiracy thriller. Can you pronounce this for me, Eli?
It's Ars Paradoxica.
Ars Paradoxica. Thank you very much. I was about to do it and knew I was going to butcher it. The improver in me was like, don't. Just say no, not yes, say no. But later, Eli co-founded the podcast collective, The Whisper Forge, which is a phenomenal name. And with that same team, Eli then launched her own show, The Far Meridian, and has written guest episodes for other podcasts all over these networks. And it's a small world, so you probably know Eli if you've listened to a bunch of these productions, like the post-apocalyptic epic Our Fair City, sci-fi adventure Marsfall, and the critically acclaimed superpower drama, The Bright Sessions. So welcome, Eli. Is there anything you'd like to say?
Just echoing what people said before. Excited to be here and chat audio with you guys.
Oh, yeah. All right. And our next and final panelist is just a legend in this industry. So many cool things happening for Mr. E.J. Kavounas. So I'm so sorry. Did I pronounce that right? Kavounas?
Kavounas.
Kavounas. I wrote
Just
down
think Kahuna. Kahuna.
Kahuna. Oh,
Yeah, there you
see,
go.
thank you, EJ, and I appreciate you making sure I'm saying that correctly. It's one of my biggest fears is saying someone's name wrong. But EJ started his career as a PA on the television series on Babylon 5. He then went into finance, where he spent most of his career, but he has recently come back into the entertainment industry, producing a feature released last year called Hero Mode, starring Mira Sorvino and Sean Austin. Oh, Samwise Gamgee. Currently on Stars. EJ is so passionate about science fiction and produced a web series which won Best Series at the Boston SciFi Film Festival in 2017, and it is available on Recursor TV. His current project is Broken Road, a limited series sci-fi western starring Lana oh my goodness, why can't I pronounce her name now?
Right.
Mikasic. Lana Mikasic, and a whole other wonderful cast of folks, and it is soon to be released on Fable and Folly, which is
Our
near
favorite.
and dear to my heart and so many people. What was that, EJ?
I was saying our favorite.
Oh,
Fable and Folly.
well, we don't play favorites here. It's
Okay.
our favorite.
In the top 5.
With that being said, there's just so much that I can't wait to unpack with you, EJ. And I'm so glad you're back in the entertainment industry. You belong here. You've done some pretty rad stuff. And I listened to that trailer and it got my blood pumping. Cannot wait to hear what episode
awesome.
1
Thank
sounds
you.
like.
Thank you.
All right. So, EJ, is there anything else you'd like to say?
Just thank you very much for hosting the panel. Super excited to be here and happy to be back to the Boston SciFi Film Festival.
All right. Yeah, it's nice to have a veteran here. You have an idea of how this all goes, and being an award winner, I mean, you got some on the inside. That's awesome. But
I can't give any secrets, but
well, yet we have
maybe
to
later,
reel them in a little
after
bit first,
panel.
right?
Right.
Dangle. All right. So we want to get right to the questions, folks. And what we're going to do now is spend as much time as we can digging into this amazing topic with these phenomenal folks that you see in front of you. So the first question, we're just going to dive right in. And the first question I wanted to ask folks was, what really brought you into the world of fiction podcasting and storytelling? And do you have experience in other creative mediums as well that you bring to this genre? And why don't we start with Richard?
Yeah. So initially, when I was creating Visionaries, I had written it to be a TV show. So I have a screenwriting background, and realizing that I did not have the resources, the means, or even the budget to execute what the idea was, I found that doing an audio drama would allow me to have that creative flexibility and just kind of staying true to the theme and not having to settle with anything. And so that's how I kind of got into it. And those are the two forms of writing, between screenwriting and audio writing, that I hop back and forth between. But that is how I got in here, and that is, since then I've just loved what the audio world has provided, and it's just been a ride.
Well, I'm so glad you're a part of this amazing community, because you've brought so much, and it really is just like you start to feel that community connection pretty quickly when you enter into audio drama. Yeah, I'm just really glad you're here. Why don't we move on to Faith? How about you?
Like Richard, I started in film, and my master's degree is in screenwriting, so that's what I plan to do. And my first show, Boom, started out as a film, and again, just don't have the money to make something like that, or trying to figure out a way to keep it mine without selling it. So audio drama was the way to go. My mom, as she likes to say, was born the same year as television, so she listened to old time radio dramas when they weren't old time, and she got me kind of into audio world. Like I listened to X-1 and The Shadow and like old shows like that, and then found fiction podcasts and was like, you know what, I think this is the way to do it. This is the way to get into it. And I am kind of obsessed with it now. I still do films every once in a while, but I really love the audio world and just having that quick access to audiences and being able to bring a show to them whenever I want to.
Yeah, and I totally agree with what you and Richard said about kind of that the money thing being a boundary in film and in television is not the same sort of hurdle and gatekeeping that you experience with audio drama. And I think that is something that really does let people express that creativity in a really beautiful way, whereas otherwise these stories might not be heard. And Eli, do you have anything you want to add?
Well, I actually got into fiction podcasting by joining a pre-existing production. So Ars Paradoxica, I joined the writers team in season 2. And I had already kind of been an audio fiction fan for a while, listening to Ars Paradoxica, Wolf 359, the Bright Sessions. And so I just kind of wanted to join a team and kind of learn from them how the sausage gets made, so to speak. And so then from working with that team, I kind of, I guess, had a little bit more tools in my belt, so to speak, before launching my own show, The Far Meridian. So, but similarly, my background is in screenwriting. I've also, written for the stage and whatnot. So I definitely kind of feel you with the background in screenwriting and then figuring out how to translate those skills to just the audio medium.
Mm-hmm. I meant to say earlier, Far Meridian, your performance in that always just like warms my heart. It's such a beautifully genuine performance. And I think what you're saying, 100%, it's sometimes the way to get in is to learn by doing with others. And it's such an open community that I feel like if that is a hurdle about just trying to break in, go do something with someone else and really experiment that way and find out what you like. And it's cool to hear so many people have this screenwriting background. That's awesome. EJ, what about you?
Well, so my background is more on the producing side, and I was working on a project based on an adaptation of a short story option called Patience Lake, with a screenwriter, Jacob Pinion, who's a writer on Fear the Walking Dead and just a fantastic talent. And we're actually thinking about turning it into a feature. And so he was working on a feature script for the project. And then, we started listening to some of these podcasts and we realized, the material we had, which just started out in, kind of in a short story format, really lent itself to, an audio telling of the story and really needed, more space, I think, than just the, kind of 90 to 120 minutes of a screenplay. So we then took that concept and expanded it into a 10-episode miniseries, which is what we're working on now, which is Broken Road. So that was sort of our way into it. And it was really interesting, like when Jacob's breaking down the episodes, it just felt like everything was working better in terms of giving the characters more time, more airtime, and letting each character kind of have his or her story told with a little more space. So it worked out really well to switch to this format. So we're excited to finish it and get it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've been working on Broken Road now for a couple of months, if not a year or so now.
It's been a while. We started recording in August, September of last year. So we're just going through pickups now, editing. It takes a long time. I mean, getting we've done it all asynchronous. I'm curious. I'd love to hear how other people are kind of doing, what their process is like. This is our first project, so we're sort of learning as we're going, but we had all the actors perform asynchronous, and like they would record their portion of the script, and we had them do the whole 10-episode series. So it was a lot of material, and then that all came back to us, and then we tried to put it together, and then we realized like, oh, these people are talking like they're in two different projects. Like we need to, go back and, give notes to try to create more cohesion. But it's been great. We've had just a wonderful cast. Everyone's, COVID actually helped a lot because everyone's sort of got their own setups
EJ,
at home now.
Don't say that out loud.
Well, I mean, it just has made it more conducive to people doing, having their own kind of booths and stuff at home that, so that sort of played into, that was, one upside to this terrible thing that's happened is, making podcasts is easier in some ways remotely.
That's true. What about other people? What have been your experiences working on your shows during the pandemic?
For me, sorry,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
It's weird because I've done Apollyon's my third show, and I've done each show differently. Boom, we did fully in person. Like everyone was in studio. We did the entire season, like EJ said, we did an entire season in 3 days. So it was a lot of time in studio with a cast of like 17 people. And then Margaritas and Donuts was fully remote. No one ever met each other. No one spoke to each other or did anything like that. And then Apollyon was kind of a hybrid where I did one-on-one directing, and then I had 2 people in studio who happened to be local. But because of the pandemic, it was, like EJ said, it was much easier to find people because a lot more people have studio setups at home. So the scheduling worked out well, and it was easier for me to cast outside of Nashville. Not that Nashville doesn't have a lot of talent, but it was nice that I actually could have actors all over the world be part of it, and it not be that hard to find people who had a setup and could do it.
Mm-hmm. No, that's true. The voice acting kind of blew up in a way that I think a lot of people didn't know or like expect to happen in the accessible way that it did. But that's definitely, those are some great points. And Richard, you were going to say something as well?
Yeah, I actually, so Visionaries I did it exactly how Faith did. Boom, we're same thing, had a big cat, like 17 actors in the studio. We managed to do season 1 in 5 days. But COVID did present a major roadblock, because that was something that I wanted to try to continue that style. And, it's hard to have so many people in the studio and, with COVID going on. So that has just been a bit of a road bump. But as things are getting closer, a lot better, I've been in touch with the actors, and we definitely are planning to just pick it all back up and get back to work and finish what we started.
Mm-hmm. I do think that there's something interesting about the process of creating a podcast. Like, there is no linear way to do it. And I think that sometimes people get that sort of tied up in their minds that you have to do something a certain way, because not that it's as stringent in film or in television production, but there is, because it's been around for so long on a kind of like more global scale, I think that people have an understanding of how production works. And with podcasting, it's kind of up to you. It's kind of the chef's secret recipe, or spice, whatever you like to say. Eli, did you want to contribute anything about that?
Yeah, no, having worked with so many different productions, I've seen so many kind of different production styles of how people, make their own show. And I think that's kind of one of the strengths of the medium, as you were saying, is that you really get to decide what production looks like. And that can be both a boon and kind of a drawback sometimes. I found that, like, at least for my process, I have to be very intentional with how I do production and really work with the individuals and actually sit down, have a lot of conversations with them to make sure we're all on the same page about what their needs are, what my needs are. And really understanding that, like, sometimes when you have a disagreement, you might actually be saying the exact same thing, just in a different way. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of been like both the frustration and the joys, being able to better understand your own project from working with other people. So yeah, that's been my experience.
Yeah, 100% agree. And that's why I think that it's such a cool community. And I know I've said this already like 4 times, but we all do kind of work together in different capacities, and you start to get, creative ideas about how one person works. You might not take all of their protocol or all of their process, but you do start to pick apart what's really, really great, and what works for you. And I think that actually leads us into the next question, which it's one of my favorites. So what are your favorite parallels between the film and podcasting landscape? And really, what's different, what's interchangeable, what makes them something that is accessible to, both these parties? Anyone can jump in when they're ready.
I mean, storytelling is, you can go ahead, Richard.
No, please.
I was just saying, like, storytelling is storytelling. Like, if you have like really solid writing, you're working with like great performers and whatnot, like you can still get a really great show out of it. So I think that, like, across all mediums, like, we kind of have an understanding of what story can be. That being said, working within only an audio medium presents really interesting constraints that can actually really let your show blossom. Like, my show, the Far Meridian, is very much in like a magical realist type of genre, and there are things that we do in the audio medium that would be far more difficult to execute in a visual medium. And so I think, like, because the audience is actually visualizing the story that you're presenting them, it kind of means that you and the audience are creating the story hand in hand. And so I think, like, that's kind of like the interesting element of working in just an audio medium as opposed to a visual medium.
Yeah, great insights. And Richard, what were you going to contribute?
I was going to say that, like what I really enjoyed, my acting background kind of bleeds into how I direct. So I like that my experience, whether it was on film or for the podcast, I would still have this hands-on approach, and that didn't have to change. If anything, it was more of a difference because I realized how much the acting, not saying acting in film isn't important, but you also have visuals. There's so much things you can add to a film, whereas opposed of your podcast, like I think the acting is a little more magnified because we're going off of sound and our voice actors. So there was an appreciation of how important it was to like just try to get the perfect cast and the voices to fit and really bring the story to life. And just what was interchangeable for me was just kind of the same rules. I went into production for Visionaries as I would for any film, and I found it to be very, like, it was a nice familiar sense. And I think that made the transition, at least that part of the transition, a lot easier of just how do I prep for pre-production, for production, and post. So that was, it's interesting. And I think it like Eli was saying, there's just certain aspects that you just have to be aware of that's just a little different, but storytelling is storytelling. And if you have the key components, you can just kind of ride through.
Well, it's funny just in thinking about both of your shows, Richard and Eli, there's a very different narrative structure that works almost like it's a film where you have that sort of unreliable narrator guiding you. Like Richard in the first episode of the show, just because for folks who are listening, you need to go listen. I love that narrative structure where you have someone sort of like the Galadriel character in Lord of the Rings who's guiding you through this experience, but you're not 100% sure if the characters know everything that you know. And Eli, it's the same way with your character where she's experiencing everything firsthand, but because of the way she's engaging and talking out loud and something that I'm sure none of us can identify with, narrating ourselves or our lives, you start to wonder, like, are you actually experiencing everything that she is, or do you have these tidbits of knowledge that she might not have come to yet? And I think that is something that we see a lot in film and really connects these storytelling components, but it becomes very intimate in audio in a way that you don't experience with film. Faith or EJ?
100%.
Oh, Richard, sorry, what were you going to say?
No, I was just saying, I agree 100%.
Oh, yeah, no, you can agree with me lots. That's fine. You can interrupt me to agree with me.
110%.
100%. Don't worry about it. But yeah, Faith or EJ, do either of you want to interject?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think
one of you. EJ.
Jump ball. Look, I think the parallels to other media are really interesting, and I'm kind of coming into it from more of kind of a TV and feature paradigm, and I think it's interesting because all these so many shows that are now on streaming services or TV series started off as podcasts. I'm sure people have a lot of thoughts about why that's happening, and some other thoughts as well, but it is an interesting, it's become an interesting place for the streamers to find new IP. And it's also interesting to me that almost all of it has been kind of in the true crime genre. And, as opposed to, more other genres like science fiction or fantasy. But I think what's interesting is just the idea of, to me, podcasting is almost this hybrid of like an audiobook and a TV series where, there's clearly an element of, kind of trying to create, visuals just through words, and through performance, and that became also really interesting as we went through the process of, trying to get actors who had more of a TV or, film kind of background to perform in an all audio environment. That was actually a bit of a challenge and took some directing. I'd be interested to hear if other people have had that experience and how you're able to get actors who kind of rely on a performance, that's visual and uses hand gestures and facial expressions to convey the performance as opposed to just an all audio environment. It was, for some that took a little bit of adaptation for some of our actors.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can actually speak to that because for Boom, I think I had one professional voice actor. The rest of them were stage and TV. And we found that the studio actually wasn't enough. There wasn't enough space because we were in a very small studio. We ended up second day moving to a larger space so that they could move around. Because they
Right.
needed to use their bodies to move around. And it actually gave a better performance when I was like, just make sure you realize the microphone is here. But, they did a little movement and had to move a bit. And I got more natural performances out of them because of that. And I think that's my biggest thing is trying to figure out how to get someone to emote mostly through their voice when they're used to using their entire bodies to convey an emotion. And like some people are like, oh, it's super easy for a person who's used to doing narration to move to voice acting. And I'm like, it's a completely different animal to do
Preach.
commercial narration than it is to be a voice actor. And for them and for all of you who do acting, I'm amazed at you. I can't, I don't know how to do that. I can, I read my intro and that's it. But
It
being
was
able
great.
to thank you. But finding that way to use that emotion when you do only have the sound to work with. I think that's the biggest difference for me working from film to audio. But like everyone said, it's storytelling is storytelling.
Yeah, I as a voice actor, a self-proclaimed voice actor, I find that being in the booth is actually where I have the most fun. Because when you're on stage, it's in front of a camera, you sort of have this I once had a professor tell me that I act too much with my eyebrows. I'm sure no one on this panel has seen me be reactive with my eyebrows. But and that stuck with me because sometimes that's what I needed to get to the place to get the right tone and tonality to get something across that I really wanted to portray in a character. But in the booth, what's so great is that you wear a skin that everyone else kind of puts on you. And as long as your voice is connecting, the pictures come, and it can create this really powerful experience. I was bringing up intimacy, that when it's played out in film in front of you, you're taken there and you get to experience that magic and that world building. But when you do it on your own, it can hit a whole different level depending on the direction, the writing, and the skill level of your performers. But yeah, if anyone else has anything to add before we jump on to the next question, do so now.
Just to go off what EJ was saying, at least for me, when with the actors in the booth and how to get the performance right there and when they're in limited spaces, because I was in the same situation. I had 3 actors in one little booth sharing a mic for bigger scenes. But I think a lot of what helped me a lot was I did a lot of rehearsals before. And even in my rehearsals, I wanted them to get used to not looking at each other. So I always had them rehearse back to back and just get used to reacting off of the voice acting. And that helped a lot and got them ready. So that helped for me. And there wasn't an issue of they were able to just kind of go in the booth and just turn it right up.
Yeah, nice. That's a great point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, echoing the rehearsal process is so important. And I think one of my favorite things to do actually on the day when I'm working with actors who are much more used to, being on camera is I will say, let's just do a silly take. Let's just be as buck wild out there as possible. And I feel like that really brings people so far out of their shell that sometimes that's the take we've used actually. It's just because all of a sudden they're so much more committed to what their voice is doing. And it just kind of breaks them out of the more, I think, nuanced acting of film, because we were saying, you can rely on your body when you can be visually seen. So yeah, just I feel you, it is definitely kind of a pivot when you're working with actors who are not used to just voice acting.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to be said too about when I've listened to all of your shows, there you can hear the direction in a positive way. There's a polish that I think comes when you've been doing this kind of business a while, where you might have to pivot how you're getting a person to get where they're going, but there's a lot of skill set you can bring from the directing side of film and television that really does actually heighten the performance of these voice actors, because a lot of the time voice actors, for years anyway, were solely cartoon and animation, or really cutthroat gritty dramas that were, like you were saying, EJ, audiobooks. And now we're seeing these nuances like magical realism in the Far Meridian, and that character doesn't have to be hyper serious all the time. She gets to explore a lot of emotions in a way that I don't think that subtlety used to exist in podcasting or an audio drama.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think also video games too. We found a lot of phenomenal voice actors who had a lot of experience in video games, and were just great at doing different voices. And
Last of Us 2 and Last of Us come to mind.
I was about to say that.
Mm.
Yep. That game had me so caught up. I was emotional playing that game, going through the story. It's like one of the best writing I've just experienced through just it overall. It was a pleasant game to experience. Wow. If anyone has not played Last of Us, yes, it's really good.
You got it. Though, just in full confession, do it when you have the emotional capacity to put it down.
Wow.
Put it down when you need to.
Yes. Yes.
But I think that leads to the next question in a really good way. So, like Last of Us and other productions where we again are being brought into this visual world, how do you create this immersive cinematic experience with audio as the main medium? We've touched on this a little bit, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. What's the most important component with audio that grabs your audience?
Okay, I'm going to jump in because I sound crazy when I talk about it, so I'll let everybody else sound better when I get very obsessed with how things sound. Like, we spent a whole day recording footsteps, and different. I knew that my cast was going to be on a deck. I knew that we were going to be here and we were going to take long walks on greenways. So I went outside with a microphone and walked a mile on a greenway so that we could get the different sounds of gravel and asphalt and grass and all that. So I probably have about 4 hours. Oh, I'm so sorry. I have probably 4 hours of footsteps on different medium just so I can use them. Like when, I have a scene where somebody gets out of a car on the side of the road. So I know that 4 steps will be in the gravel before they go over to the road. So we did things like that. So I was very particular about what sounds we used and what sounds were in it. And my sound designer, Joshua Sui, probably has 80, 90 tracks for just a conversation between two people, because we were building so much background sound. And I know that, a general listener is not hearing all of that, but it feels fuller to me to completely build this environment so that you can get the visual in your head as long as you have all of these sounds. Because I've been told since I started film school that people can excuse bad picture, but will never excuse bad sound. So I'm obsessed with having very solid sound so people can really be immersed without being taken out of it.
And I will just say quickly to your point, Faith, I actually think when you say that normal people wouldn't actually consider that, it's probably because you've done it so well. You haven't left any room for consideration. And that in itself is an art form. And I think that really does separate audio drama from, I know we have Foley artists with filmmakers and television and different mediums, but it is something that is so integral that it has to be taken with the utmost seriousness and patience. What do other people think?
Go ahead, EJ.
I'm sorry.
Richard, you're so polite. One day you're going to be like, no, I'm first. You've given everyone else their shot first.
Kristi, you pick.
Oh, no, EJ, you're already front and center. Richard, you're going to wait.
Sorry. So I was just going to say, Faith, I'd love to license your footstep archive, if that's possible.
Oh,
your library footsteps. I mean, it's I never would have thought about it before, trying to produce an episode, but there's so many different types of footsteps. And is it, on pavement? Is it on, grass? And, I mean, just to your point, and we experienced that very much. So, yeah, I mean, I think, all the things we're talking about in terms of creating I think there's everyone knows what closing a door sounds like, but to recreate that sound in a way where the timing is perfect and it's synchronized to the dialogue in a way that, creates an image in the listener's head it's really hard. And when it works, it's seamless. And when it doesn't work, something's wrong and it kind of pulls you out of the piece. So I think, I mean, some of the Q Code productions have just unbelievable sound design. I mean, I was listening to one of them. I think it was Blackout or one of the other, or the new one, and I was just walking down the street. I was like walking the dog, and I thought someone was like calling to me. I mean, it's just the immersiveness of that sound design is incredible. But obviously, there's a huge amount of production. I mean, a lot of dollars were spent creating that sound. So I think it's it's a rabbit hole. You can spend a lot of time and money creating a perfect kind of immersive sound environment.
And I think what's interesting too, just to your point, is, beyond it being, does the door open and close effectively with the conversation and with the timing, what kind of a door is it? Is it
Right.
a metal door that's got, really squeaky hinges in a prison? Or is this an old barn door that's like flailing in the wind a little bit in the background? This is the kind of stuff that if you were on a set, you have the door, you build the door you want. But with audio, you get to explore even little things like that that seem little
storytelling.
to other people. Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah,
Exactly.
like you're saying, it's storytelling to you can actually do something with the sound effect.
Mm-hmm. Richard, what were you? Oh, sorry, Jay.
I was just gonna say that going with Faith and EJ, like sound super important, and that plays a huge role. It's hard with audio if you don't have good sound design and such, but like what's also really important to add to that cinematic feel for me is pacing. And we're asking the listeners to just imagine 100%. And I think like for a listener to go from the beginning to the end and just feel that feel and really be immersed, the pacing is so important, because once they get out, it might be hard to get people back. So like I think that showed me, especially the difference between pacing in film and for audio dramas. I realized when I was going between both. So I think that is super important. Like, do you hold that door before it closes? Are those brief pauses between people talking? I think that just adds that realness, because that's what we do, right? We don't talk in perfect sentences. We stumble, we take little pauses. So I think pacing is super important to adding to that cinematic feel and really allowing the audience to just say, let me just, suspend my disbelief, whatever the case is, and just really buy into what's happening in the story.
Mm-hmm. Eli, did you want to? Oh, you are on mute.
Yep, I have a cough, so I wanted to make sure that wouldn't interrupt. But kind of building off of that, like the pacing is so important, and oftentimes, like I will even talk about sound design with a sound designer in kind of terms of music, like, oh, I want this to feel really staccato, or like I want this kind of like building crescendo of sound and whatnot. Yeah. And then also like timing of like, doors being closed, things being put down. The sound designer can also be an actor in that way and can kind of punctuate the acting already done by the voice actor of when things happen in the scene. And then kind of going back to what Faith was saying about having, really accurate or like recording all of the Foley and whatnot. We came into an interesting disagreement one time. The sound designer was working with Misha Stanton about what a record breaking sounds like. And we realized that sometimes it's not about what a sound actually is in real life, but also about what an audience is expecting the sound to be. Because the actual sound of a record breaking is very flat. It's not very interesting or orally. And so we realized, we need to actually combine the breaking of I think Misha ended up using a light bulb. And that all of a sudden it created the sound that we were expecting to hear. So it is really interesting kind of figuring out those little nuances of like, okay, what can we stay true to actual reality? What sounds like reality because that's what we're expecting. And then finally, sometimes if you're dealing in sci-fi fantasy, you literally have to build your own sound. Like, what does this alien sound like? What does a talking mountain sound like? You know, and therein the sound designer, I think, is so integral to giving it that very like big, like cinematic feeling, encompassing the world you're building.
I just got to say, Eli, 100%. And I got to shout out Eli Hamada McElveen, who is a sound designer in our community, and he's incredible. He does a lot of work on Fable and Folly and other productions. But I remember one day for Civilized, it was one of the first episodes, he came downstairs after editing, was so excited, and he's like, I made mechanical birds. And we were like, what? He's just like, yeah. And he took me upstairs, and I wish I could repeat everything he'd said because it was magical, but he was just showing me this layering that he had done to make these alien birds that still sounded human enough to be recognized as birds, but they had like a trill that was mechanical. And like any of the monsters he's made, none of them are described, they're just existing. And so sound does do that really expansive world building in a way in audio that is just like unparalleled anywhere else, in my opinion. Before we move on to the next question, though, is there anything else anyone would like to add?
Yeah, I actually have a follow-up on that. What about music? What about score? How do people use music and score for like transitions and to kind of create that immersive experience?
I think that's really important. The composer I was able to bring on, I know for a fact if I did not have him, if he didn't come up with that music, Visionaries would not have the same impact. And it helped with transitions, whether or it was just back of a scene. I think, especially if you want that cinematic and you want that TV kind of feel, I think having music is really important. It can really help boost the audio drama.
Yeah, and similar to film, you can definitely connect music to certain characters. So for example, we have a specific, like very low tone whenever our villain character appears. And it's just like, it's this very subtle, unsettling cue that, oh no, she's here and it's about to get intense. So yeah, like, you know, like Richard and EJ, like music can be so integral to establishing the tone of your piece.
Faith, did you want to add anything about that?
It's just, I love music. I love adding music to things, but I'm really happy to have someone else do it because I never, like in my head, I'm like, oh, I want music here, but what is it? So having a music supervisor, I have Catherine Seaton working on Apollyon, and she's done amazing work. She did our original theme, but I didn't have the budget to have her compose the whole thing. So we're using the sound library, but she is definitely taking, you know, already existing music and making it really work for our show. And like Eli said, we've given characters certain music that it's always the music that plays for them. And we've even, without giving any spoilers away, there's an episode where there's a connection between two characters that you don't know about unless you start listening to the music, because one character has their music and one other character, and then by the end of it, they start blending together. The music starts blending together. So if you hear that, you'll understand that they have a relationship, but it's not blatantly said in the show. So I love bringing music in. And I mean, there are plenty of shows that don't use music and they still work, but I do think that that does add to the cinematic value of your show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with all of that. I think that music, when used in the right context, is just, it provides the mood so the audience is there with you. It doesn't make them work for it in the same way. And actually, Faith, it's something that you said really sparked a thought. I think sometimes when people enter the podcast sphere, they forget that they don't have to do everything themselves. You do not have to be a jack of all trades in order to have a show work. And there are people out there that are so like musically genius composers and audio designers. And I think that there are great sites like freesound.org where you can go and get the basics if you need some Foley work and you're starting out, and it's a great resource. But if you can, or if you can find someone who's willing to do it within a a decent, or not a decent budget, a budget that's within your capacity, then let someone who loves to do it and someone who can do it well.
Yeah, 100%.
Oh,
Good
cat
point.
butt. Who doesn't love little cat butt to take us to the next question? What a segue. All right. So the next question I have is actually, that's a really good point, a really good segue. But what do you know now as creators that you wish you knew before you started? And what's a piece of advice you would give to yourself if you were to go back and do it all again? And actually,
I'm jumping in.
I was
am
like,
jumping
Richard,
in.
I was going to call on you. Yeah,
I'm
Richard.
jumping in. Respect the space, and what I mean by that is when I first wrote the TV pilot for Visionaries, and then I really wanted to transition to audio drama, I thought at first I can just like, oh, I'm just gonna take like my teaser and first act, and that'll be episode 1. Then I'll take act 2 and 3 and make that episode 2, and I can just build that way. And did not work out. Didn't read well. It made me I had to go back, listen to a lot more shows, and go back to the drawing board and like outline and start all over again. So I think there may be this idea of like, okay, I can just take my script for TV or film and just kind of cram it into the audio place. And I just do not think that will work. And it goes both ways, because I've also went back to the pilot. And even if as I went back to writing TV, I realized I've gotten so used to writing for audio that you have to respect the TV space, and it's very different. So I think that was like 3 months I was trying to cram it in until I realized it will not work. And let me actually go back to the outline and let me do it from scratch. I know the characters, but let me really start the story from scratch and build it up. So that is something I think everyone who coming from film going to audio drama, you definitely, it's written very differently. It sounds different. You just have to respect the space. And yeah, that's my best advice.
I think that's great. What about you, EJ?
I mean, we're still learning, but I would say, it certainly takes longer than expected. Even though it's just, coming from a, film TV background, you're dealing with sound, and it's mostly post-production. It takes, I mean, these are really intricate pieces. And like we've talked about them, there's so much that goes into sound design and getting the right performance and score. All these things just take a long time. So I think that's probably the one thing I would have budgeted more time for the project. Go for the next one. We'll do that.
As a side, 100% agree. I've been working on a production called The Denial Project, which is an improv show that's a horror production, and it's improv. So we're in the room performing against each other, and we thought it would be done because it's improvised in 3 or 4 months. It's been almost a year, so it takes a while, and that's okay. Like, budget that time and be patient with yourself if you go over your budget. Eli?
Oh gosh. I think for me is to not forget kind of the tail end of the process. So, we've talked a lot about like actors and sound designing and whatnot. But like when your show is actually like out there or about to be released, making sure you don't forget about like press kits, engaging with people on social media. Transcripts are a really big thing that I encourage people to have. It's therefore, accessible to people who might need transcripts to enjoy your show. It also does help with like SEO and stuff like that. So I think just kind of like for me, the most fun process is like the writing and the production and the post. Like I love that. And I absolutely like hate everything after. To me, it's not as fun, but it's so necessary. And I think just kind of really engaging like with the community, building your fan base and whatnot is important, because you made the stories so that people could experience it. So making sure to have the time and energy to put into that is definitely important.
That's great. Thank you. And Faith?
I would have gone back and told myself to trust the audience more. I realized in the first show I wrote, I depended very heavily on the narrator because I was coming from a visual medium and was feeling like I needed to tell people what was going on. But as I got more into it, I realized that sound can tell the story, the actors can tell the story, and that I just didn't need to do that as much. And to echo Richard, trust the space. I really did try to jam in way too much in one season because it was coming from it being a feature film, and I was trying to like, oh, I'm just going to split up the feature film into 10 episodes, when in reality I had 5 seasons worth of story to tell and could have let it breathe a little more.
Yeah. No, that is all fantastic advice. And I don't know if anyone else ever does this, but I go back and listen to the first episode of some of my shows and I'm like, ooh. Ooh.
I'm impressed you listen. I don't even listen.
Yeah.
You got to go back to learn. You got to retrace your steps and be like, that's who I used to be. Look at that thing I did. Well, that was a choice. It's the growth that you can experience too, and I think it's so important. So I think this toolkit and like these pieces of advice you've all provided are so important. And I love that everybody comes from a different sort of stage and where your productions are. Like EJ, you're talking about how, this is one of your first forays into this as a medium, but you still come from this entertainment background of years of experience. And, we have other folks on our panel who have produced 2, 3, 4 shows, who have written, who have directed. Like, this is such a phenomenal group of talent. It's just such a pleasure to be with all of you. And I know we only have a few minutes left, so I am going to just ask 2 more questions. First of all, how do you all see the cinematic storytelling and audio continuing to grow within the industry, especially from a perspective of new people coming in? And this time I'm going to call on Eli first. She's got a thinking face, so I'm going to pick it.
It's no thoughts, just vibes. No, I think that as this industry grows, we are going to see a lot of really interesting story techniques employed. I am constantly impressed by new creators entering the space, and just the way that they play with the art form. You can have these really surreal stories, or stories that kind of really play with the framing of it and everything. And so I think as far as the cinematic element of it, we're going to see some absolutely incredible work that's building on, the work that has already happened. I just think of some of the shows that I listened to, when I first got into the medium, and just, really seeing how the medium has grown and changed. And I hope that as time goes on, more money gets put into podcasting, because, even though it is far more accessible than film or TV, microphones still cost money. Your editing software costs money. Access to sound libraries does cost money. So I'm just really hoping that, the barrier to entry, so to speak, continues to get lowered, so it can continue to have such incredible visionary voices in the medium.
And Eli, just quick question, and I'll get everyone else to follow up with this at the end. Just speaking to those resources, what's one tool you would tell a newcomer to get for sure, or to use?
Honestly, for me, because I also do voice acting, I think if you're going to put your money somewhere, it is in a quality microphone. That is a very biased answer, because I don't do sound design. So I'm sure someone with more of an editing or sound design background would probably have those recommendations to do. But I think it was Faith who said earlier, you can sit through bad cinematography, but bad sound is really difficult to get through. So I would say that's where I would put my money, but that's also literally where I personally have put my money.
Yep. No, for sure. I'm the same. That's where I would go to. Richard, what about you?
For what tool, I'd say what helped me was just slowly building my sound library, and over the years just kind of going through it, and even if it's something that I won't use, you just never know when to come back. Because I know, Eli, you were mentioning this before. There were times I used a specific sound that wasn't what I thought it was going to be, but it worked. Just hearing it, and I'm like, well, no one's going to know. There's no description of what sound is, but it sounds like it, so I'll just go with that. So definitely building that that library of sound, I'm sure will prove to be very vital, and down the line.
And how do you see the experience of
right,
the secondary, not related question at all? Wink.
I'm excited actually to see how it goes, because I do think we're going to see the doors open even more, and that's going to lead to so many more different styles of storytelling. And with sound, it's kind of like sky is the limit. You know, what you can do, how do you want to do it? So I believe we'll see this industry grow a lot more, and as this grown, we'll see a lot more unique, different ways of storytelling.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Yes, absolutely. And Faith?
I'd like to see, as the industry grows, for it to just be its own industry and not necessarily a stepping stone to something else. Because I don't know how many people have asked me, "Oh, you make podcasts. What do you want to do with it?" And I was like, "Can't it just be the podcast?
podcast.
Like, can't it just be that?" So I'd love to see that be more accepted. As in, I'm not gonna, hey, if Netflix calls, totally have it. That's great. But it would be nice if, as Eli was saying, if the money was there, for it to just live as a fiction podcast in the audio world. And as far as putting money into it, I am an editor and that is what I do. But this microphone was like me putting money into something. But I'd also say into treating your space, because I, for years, used a $40 microphone. And just as long as I had the space to, in my office, for it to work as a $40 microphone, it worked. So I think putting some money into treating this space over a really expensive microphone would be the thing that I would tell people to spend money on.
That's great advice. Yeah. Like, if you're going to spend money, like, it depends on where your specialty is, and that's great. And EJ, what about you?
I think in terms of, thinking about podcasts and audio dramas as an industry, I think it's really a really exciting time. I think, and I hope that the barriers to entry in terms of dollars are still relatively low, and I hope it stays that way. I think one interesting question I have is whether there's going to be any kind of a format, and I think about, like, in TV, how, the TV industry eventually kind of gravitated towards, like, like half-hour comedies and, 1 hour dramas. And if there's going to be some type of, format that occurs at some point, where that people, the audience gets trained to kind of expect audio dramas to be created a certain way. But I like the fact now that nothing is written, and it's all, it's really an amazing kind of time in terms of for the artists. I think you can have have the least amount of filters between the artist and creating something and getting it out into the world. So I think it's a really exciting time. I do think there's a lot more money that is coming into, audio dramas in general. And we're seeing that with, I mentioned Q Code. I mean, there's, Spotify, there's a huge, there's a long list of folks trying to, figure out how to make it work. A lot of that is going into, obviously, more, kind of the unscripted space, and then within scripted, a lot of it's more, sort of the, true crime and other genres. But I think there's a lot of, I read a lot of science fiction, and I think, it's a wonderful experience to read sci-fi. And I think I kind of look at audio drama as being somewhat of a, kind of related to that, in terms of letting the author, kind of express, their point of view in a way that, isn't filtered through a studio or a network or anything else. So I think it's an exciting time. I hope it, and I think actually with COVID ending and people commuting more, I think there's going to be more consumption of audio dramas as well. So I think that's a really positive trend. And in terms of recommendations, I don't really have any recommendations for equipment.
It doesn't have to be equipment. It could be, you were saying a sound library you're using earlier, or you already said time. Give yourself time, patience.
Yeah,
that can be a tool too.
Yeah, I mean, I think taking time, finding the right people to collaborate with and waiting to make those relationships, I think, is really key.
Agree. All right. Well, we are in our final minute or two of this panel, so I'm going to say thank you in just a second. But just before we do, I wanted to do a real spitfire round of folks telling us a podcast recommendation that they would give to filmmakers or those looking to enter into the audio industry that really shows the boundless possibilities within audio drama. So I'm going to start with Richard. What's your recommendation?
Recommend. I'll tell you. I remember the first thing I listened to that really helped me get into audio dramas. It was the Leviathan Chronicles, and even their use of narrator really inspired me to say, okay, yeah, I can see this, and that helped for me. So I thought that was one of the cinematic stories that I heard that really helped me put Visionaries in place, and it gave me the inspiration.
That's awesome. Thank you. Faith?
I'm gonna go with the Rose Drive by Royal Vega. That show, besides amazing storytelling, it has like the biggest twist, and the sound design changes as the twist changes. I highly recommend that to anybody who's coming from film into audio dramas.
Nice. EJ?
One of the first I heard was The Message by Gideon,
yes.
the GE, which I just thought that was brilliant. And Gideon's done a number of other really brilliant podcasts.
Yes, they are phenomenal. We just announced them on the Fable and Folly Network the other day.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. And Eli, what about you?
Okay, I'm going to squeeze in two. I'm so sorry. Wolf 359, which was the podcast that like really got me into it as far as like writing goes. It's just absolutely brilliant. And then the second actually has kind of been buzzing lately. Archive 81 just dropped on Netflix, but the original podcast I think is brilliant. It was specifically made for the sound medium, particularly I think it's a season 3 episode, Exist in the Space You Are Currently Occupying. I just remember like listening to it and the sound design like blew me away. So that would be my recommendation.
Nice. I have two too, so don't worry. Mine would be the one that got me in originally, Alba Salix, Royal Physician with Sean Howard and Eli Hamada McElveen. Those, I wouldn't be in this space without those lovely gents. So I adore them and always promote that show. And I would say Magnus Archives, because I know it's so basic, you guys. Everybody loves Magnus Archives, but I love it. It really got me in because I'm a horror buff, and I was just like, you can do this with just audio? What? So that would be mine. But I just want to say thank you so much, all of you, for coming and for inviting us into your spaces as well and telling us all of your insights and thoughts about this. It's been such a wonderful hour. I'm actually very sad that it's done, but I just want to say thank you so much to our panelists, to Faith, Richard, Eli, and EJ. Thank you to everyone at the Boston SciFi Festival who's putting this together. The Boston SciFi Film Festival. I almost forgot this was a film festival because we were talking about podcasts for so much, but there are so many other wonderful panels you can check out, and it's online. It's a hybrid of online and in person, and if you're able to check it all out online safely, we encourage you to do that from all over the world. And big shout outs to Violet and to Jordan for helping us behind the scenes and setting all of this up. We couldn't have done this without you. So thank you again to everyone. We hope you enjoyed the panel, and we'll talk to you when we talk to you. Feel free to reach out. Hopefully our socials will be included somewhere, and we'll see you around the space. Take care.
Thank you.
Take care, guys.